This box of Chaos Warriors was released in 1996, and just like most 29-year-old boxes, it's a bit worn out and ready to settle down. And that's exactly what's going to happen because it's time for these guys to find their forever home. Short version, this is the beginning of a project. I'm going to work my way through painting this entire box of Chaos Warriors to give to the Patreon members in the Oldhammer tier. And when starting any project, you need an idea of what you're going to do. The idea for this project has always been what would Synthwave look like in the 90s. I've rolled out this scheme a few times and it works, but Oldhammer models are a bit different. While they have a metric butt-ton of nostalgia and goofball charm, what they don't have is the same quality and detail crispiness that we're used to with modern miniatures. The plastic's a lot lighter in colour, which makes zero difference, but it is a lot more brittle than the plastics that we're used to today. And even when using a poly cement, it doesn't always like to stay stuck. And even though the poses are generally a little bit more open, they are very squished in and hunched over, so we're going to paint this in a sub-assembly.
'Tis but a scratch.
Even though we've covered this scheme before, let's see if it works with Oldhammer. And we're going to start off with Regal Blue, which is a little bit brighter than usual, because we're really after that bold and super saturated 90s feel. And one of the first steps to achieving that is some super solid color blocking. Now typically I don't paint this way. What I'll usually do is pick a section, most likely the leg, and work all the way up through the gradients. It's a great way to hone in and really get the concentration in on one part. It also works out a lot easier for me when I'm trying to show and explain it to anybody that's watching. But the drawback is the amount of time that it adds to painting the model. I paint for fun, so I don't usually care about efficiency. Looks like I don't really care about it being in frame either. Come on idiot, put it back in focus, there we go. But by blocking in the colours and working colour by colour instead of section by section, you get into a rhythm that's more about completing parts. Also with Oldhammer, sometimes the details don't actually exist. Remember that part for later. With all that blue blocked in, we can start on our pink blends. When it comes to blending, we have one major mission, and that's to change from one colour into another colour and blur out the separation. And there are a few different ways that we can go about it. The quickest and easiest technique I've figured out that works for me is to create half-step mixes. In this case, what I've done is taken the original blue and then mixed a little bit of the pink in to make a colour in between the two. And now that it's not such a drastic change, it means I can come back in with the original blue as a glaze and start to smooth out and blend out that blur. And at the same time, it's also going to give us another lighter layer that we can start to build up with our vibrant and brighter colours on. So now that middle colour has made a softer transition between the two stark colours, and it's going to make it a lot easier to be able to try and blend it out smoothly. I'm also using pretty thin coats, which means I can use the same colour to keep stacking on top of itself and slowly build up opacity. And just like standard layering, every single time you add a layer, you want to leave a little bit of the previous layer showing. Vincey V has the best way to describe this. He keeps saying, like shingles on a roof. For the trim, I'm going to use the same idea but a little bit differently. To start with, we need a nice solid coat of Scarab Green. When we were painting the armor plates, I didn't really care too much about neatness. But since now they're done and we're working on trim, you really do want to take a little bit of extra time and make sure that you're not getting any overspill. But if you do, no big deal, just go back and tidy up with the original colour that you splodged on. And just like the armor panels before it, I took a little bit of deep Azure and mixed it into our base coat of Scarab Green to make a transition colour. And even then, honestly, it's still a bit of a jump. And eventually, we will come back to the Scarab Green, thin it down into a glaze, and then blur out that transition line again. In saying that, right now, I'm not too worried about how smooth the blends are because I'm trying to sketch in where I want the light to sit. When it comes to non-metallic metal, I know that a lot of people are really worried about how smooth the transitions are. And when it comes to non-metallic metal, that is definitely not the most important part. What we're actually looking for is a quick contrast between light and dark, and to make sure that all of our light is in the right spot. When it comes to selling the effect that something is made out of a reflective material, light placement is way more important than smooth blends. And with some Oldhammer models, a little bit of extra scratchiness actually helps, because the other side of this arrow doesn't actually exist. As we all know, you guys have pumped this channel up so much that I am now a member of the Army Painter Factory team. And I know you know because multiple times a day, people are dropping comments saying that the Army Painter and I should put together a synthwave paint set. Well, guess what? It's not a thing yet. But here's a basic list of paints that we use day in and day out. And if you want to pick any of these up, head over to the Army Painter web store and use code HERESY5 at the checkout. And if you're in Australia, you can use that same code at in-games and get 5% off the entire Army Painter range that they keep in stock. Links to the Army Painter and in-games are in the description. Don't forget to tell them about the Patreon. Links to the Patreon are also in the description. Also, this doesn't exist either. From the pink above the knee all the way down to the armor on the side, that is one smooth piece. The rest of that detail had to be painted in. And this is some of the drawback that we face when painting Oldhammer models. And I think it's definitely worth mentioning because a lot of newer players who are now picking up the old world and checking out these sculpts for the first time are finding out the same frustrations that we had 20-30 years ago. And don't worry, it was annoying back then too. You may have heard of a few older players talking about sculpting with a brush. And it's things like this and the lack of detail crispiness that they were talking about. Between painting in panels that didn't exist and separating panels with paint was an everyday thing. And while a lot of people do complain about detail creep this day, I'm just kind of happy that there are details. Now this wouldn't be a synthwave video without our hot sunset colors. And yeah, you're right, we do generally start from pink here. But first I'm going to give it a base coat of Diabolic Plum so we don't have to go straight from black to pink. And we're going to use the same ideas as the rest of the video. We're going to continually do gradual steps up. From the Diabolic Plum, I'm just going to keep adding in more wicked pink and just put another layer on top. And once that's solidly in there, burning ore is going to be our next 50-50 mix. Now I do say this a lot, but it is important. When we say 50-50, it's not 1-to-1, that's a ratio. 50-50 when it comes to mixing colors is creating a color that is halfway between the other two colors. And a 1-to-1 ratio will not get you there most of the time, because some pigments are stronger than others. Even the transition yellow that I'm painting right now is probably 4 parts yellow to 1 part orange. Burning ore from the Army Painter Fanatic sets is fairly dominant when it comes to pink and yellow. But this is a good thing, we're going to use it to our advantage by slowly adding in more yellow as we go. The mix is going to get brighter and brighter and brighter, and every single layer is going to help form that transition. And if you work with thin layers of paint, it'll help that process even more. Check out that blade, I didn't have to do a single glaze on it. Now with some ice yellow, we're just going to go straight into a nice crispy edge highlight just to bring out the detail. And the only thing left now is to figure out what to do with the base. This is Oldhammer, we already know what we're doing for the bases. With these squares of nostalgia, there was only one thing that we could do. Goblin Green, except that doesn't exist anymore. But that 50-50 mix of Eternal Hunt and Emerald Forest is almost there. And now we get to check this thing out. There's a lot of things that I don't miss from previous editions of Warhammer, but this was a great little time machine to remind me of the things that I do miss from back then. But I love that I get to send these to some of the people that have supported the channel these last few years. You guys are the only reason that we still exist. As always, a massive thank you to In-Games, the Army Painter, and the best Patreon members in the world. Big love, you filthy heretics.